Colonel Mo is truly my hero. I was in Vietnam for 8 years as a student going to boarding school in Laos, Vietnam. And so I have a very different perspective of the Vietnam War. He was there as a prisoner of war, and his story is just uplifting and tragic and sad and wonderful all at the same time.
Well, thank you very much, Justice Stratton. And I'd like to start with a couple of, one introduction and a pitch for our benefits guide that Justice Stratton referred to. First, an introduction to Steve Cook. Steve, would you stand up? A new member of our department as our military liaison, working especially with our returning troops. And Steve has hit the ground running, is well versed in veterans issues, and we really are pleased to have him. So thanks, Steve. Thanks for being here today. The item that the Justice referred to, Chief Justice Stratton referred to, is our benefits guide put out by DVS. The roadway to veterans benefits can be rather complicated. There are 3 levels. We have the federal, the VA, we have the state, that's us, and we have the county, and there's some differences that are important. There shouldn't be any differences as far as the veteran's concerned. And so what this guide does is to tell our veterans how to find those veterans, as well as working with us in that quest. We're also working through the wizardry of people like Jason Dominguez, my assistant director, and our competent IT staff. We're going to turn this into an app, okay? And that's going to be pretty neat, and we've seen a great one in operation in California, and we're going to steal it. Justice Stratton, that's for you. We're going to have more of these out front, and if you need quantities of these, please let us know, and we've printed them by the thousands, and they don't do any good sitting in our storage room. Well, it goes to it's without saying that we are so pleased to what the progress that's being made with veterans courts as they're being created around the state. We were talking this morning, Jason and I were speaking, and Jason used the term petri dish, which is kind of an interesting word. I sort of agree with that, because we're developing these things and so that they're responsive to the needs of our veterans, and those needs may differ depending on the area, the culture, the size of the city, or the rural aspects. So it's very interesting as we go forward, and also to convince our veterans to come forward and convince the judicial system, those 88 separate agencies. We both have to deal with that. I didn't know the court system was as autonomous in Ohio as our veterans offices are. We have 88 counties and 90 ways to do business. It's very, very important in our dealing with our veterans and our citizens of the state. The basic mission of the Department of Veterans Services, it seems simple, but it's very complicated to carry out. And that's to identify our veterans, who are they, and to connect them to their benefits. In regard to today's gathering, it's important that we understand that those benefits can be very, very useful of keeping our veterans from running afoul of the law. The benefits is kind of an all-encompassing word, but benefits might be getting a veteran a job. Okay, I don't know if we could really call that a benefit, but if a veteran has a job, or a citizen of our state, anyone has a job, that can keep them from going afoul of the law. But there are more than just issues of employment that can affect our veterans due to the nature of their service. We want to make sure that we can identify those veterans that might have problems with substance abuse, have issues of homelessness, dealing with violence, and of course that can be associated with the effects of PTSD, and PTSD can be a result of traumatic brain injury. We have our folks coming home from combat today that are surviving at a rate not before seen in our history. You go back to the Civil War, and if you took a bullet in the arm, you might not live till the next day. Or if you caught a cold or drank some bad water. Now we have our soldiers returning from combat from the battlefield that are terribly, terribly injured. and they're surviving. I mean, it's good news that they're surviving, and the challenge to us is to deal with them with these crippling injuries, often involving head injuries, not to mention the psychological effects. So as we identify our veterans and connect them to their benefits, that assistance and that identification can help keep them out of our courts, keep them from running into problems. And sometimes they never make it to the courts. Suicide, violence in the family, murders, and so forth. It's a serious issue, and we're just as serious as we can be working with Justice Stratton on this tremendous initiative. We want to put our veterans on the right track, and that track will lead to further success. They've got much to be proud of for their service, and we want them to be able to motor on. And you know, there's a side effect, an unintended side effect from some of this treatment and identification and connecting that we do. And that can be that we inadvertently stigmatize those very people we're trying to help. That is the issue of PTSD. There are people that don't want to be identified, they don't want to come forward, they don't want to be helped because they feel that that would hurt them then in their quest even to get a job. PTSD becomes a stigma instead of a tool that we can help people with. And it also is in various degrees. A person can have PTSD, and a little bit of counseling, and to identify why they're angry or why they jump 10 feet when the door slams, up to very, very serious mental challenges. But we don't want to stigmatize these people and make them into an image that we might see in some sort of a grade B movie of the broken veteran. That's tragic when that happens, and it's unfair. Well, I think we're making progress in the Department of Veteran Services because of the teamwork that includes everybody in this room in that connecting our veterans and identifying them. We've been struggling. As a matter of fact, the department was created because it was determined in the state and by the VA that Ohio was among the worst states in the country as far as that simple mission, identifying our veterans and connecting them to benefits. And still our national averages are not very good. But last year, because of a concerted effort in marketing and branding, we've created a logo so people know who we are. If you see this logo with the big golden V on it, you see it now all over the state, coordinating our message with our counties, coordination with the VA. Last year, compared to a year-to-year average of ranking 46th in the nation for the level of connection to our veterans, last year our rate of improvement moved us up for that year to 26th. Okay, we still have to move that average rating up, but we see where our efforts are paying off, and we'll just focus more. And even these comments today are part of that process of informing each other of what we do for our veterans. The result of that also is very, very financially interesting as well, because most of the benefits that are received by our veterans are actually paid for by our federal tax money. That's the money that you and I paid already and went to Washington and floats around the Potomac River, and then we might get some of that back. Well, DVS can take some credit for a portion of that $5.7 billion that was received by Ohio last year, an increase of nearly $1.5 billion from the year before. And certainly a fairly good percentage of that goes into building hospitals and paying hospital staff, but about a third of that goes directly to our veterans in the form of various types of benefits. So we're pleased, even though we're faced with a number of serious challenges still, that we are showing that our efforts are paying off, because it can be discouraging. You look at the suicide rate, it was mentioned earlier today. We're not pleased with the bad news, but we can be at least encouraged that what we're doing, including the involvement with Veterans Courts, is making a difference. I mentioned the partnership between us and our own counties, and there are some different levels of authority between us and the counties, but certainly those differences exist between us and the VA as well. But we've not let any of that stand as an impediment, but only as a challenge to work more closely with these different units And we've worked with the VA at levels that I think are unprecedented, and we've heard those comments from the VA themselves. We've worked with the most senior leadership in Washington, and to be sure, we're working with the senior leadership in the regional offices here in Ohio. In the benefits office in Cleveland, we actually have a DVS office to help untangle some of the claim issues that otherwise a claim would be sent back to the individual or to the county to be resolved. We do that often with a phone call. In our medical regional office in Cincinnati, my hat's off to Jack, is he here right now? For the cooperation we've gotten from him to be able to publicize ODVS information in his health publications that are in all the VA hospitals and clinics around the state. And these things just weren't done before. You know, it's like there's these gaps, and that doesn't mean anything to our veterans. They don't understand the gaps, right? So we're closing those gaps, and my thanks to Joyce Cange in Cleveland and to Jack Hetrick in Cincinnati. I mentioned the benefits guide. We have a tremendous website that we believe is quite useful. It includes a feedback loop that if someone enters a comment on our website, I find out about it immediately, personally. And then we have folks that, especially in the form of Claire Rabideau, who works these issues with those folks who have somehow not been able to get the help they need elsewhere. A couple of initiatives that we're working on, just speak very generally about before I close, and that is in our relationships with Washington. We find that a lot of what we must do, that is we nationwide and the state level, needs to be resolved at the national level. I can't solve some of those problems just by our close relationships with our regional offices, because of course they work for their headquarters in Washington. And what we've got going are efforts to streamline the process of information sharing, including some study to transform what we do with paper into electronic databases. And as incredible as it might seem that those things don't exist right now, that we found all the heads going up and down the right direction in Washington as we've been able to pursue these objectives, coordinating as well with our National Association of State Veteran Services Directors. We're not just a lone voice out there by any means. And we're finding tremendous reception not only with the VA, but the supplier of a lot of that information, that is the Department of Defense, and that Ohio has been named for a pilot project to further develop the flow of information, and the DoD basically asking Ohio in this pilot project, if you were king, what do you need us to tell you about your veterans? That is, you know, they create the service record, right, DD 214 or what have you, or about those people getting ready to separate or retire even as far as a year out, instead of us having to fish through the information or visit a base and try to make those kind of awkward connections, that we would be able to somehow trade information about our fellow military members and veterans to provide those benefits. So once again, identifying them, connecting to the benefits, and this is just really exciting. This has just come up in the past 2 weeks, and we're working very energetically toward that. And then the last comment I want to make is to remind everyone to remind your friends and veterans, if they don't know, that in my regard, and Ohio is not unique, but not everyone has county veteran service offices. Okay, I mentioned our 88 offices. I believe that they are chiefly the front door to benefits in Ohio. The VA provides billions of dollars worth of benefits, but to really sit down with your neighbor to work out a claim or a need for financial assistance, we provide that service in each of our counties, and we're working on doing it better, and that's the name of the game. Thanks again, Justice Stratton, for the time to speak to the group and to explain a little bit of how we fit into the puzzle.